Don't you just love a great personal story? Me too. And this one is so inspiring. Meet a woman who has taken her love of the healthcare field and married it to the fight against cancer and her love of theater. By day, she earns her living as the director of patient safety for Crico Strategies. That's a division of the Risk Management Foundation of the Harvard Medical Institutions. And by night, she is the artistic director for Voices of Hope, a unique nonprofit made up of 200 musical cast members who have been impacted in some way by cancer. And together they sing, they dance, they entertain, all to benefit cancer research. And she does this every day as she deals with a chronic disease as well, multiple sclerosis. Dana Siegal, welcome to the story behind her success.
Thank you, Candy. I'm so delighted to be here.
Let's start with your day job because it sounds very important and super complicated. So can you describe your job and what it entails? And I know you're also a registered nurse.
I am. I actually started as a nurse in the emergency room and thought, quite honestly, that was where my entire career would live. But life being what it was, I was hit with a major obstacle, and early in my career, 6 or 7 years in, I was confronted with a chronic disease, MS, that made it really difficult for me to feel stable as a physical support within the emergency room. So I began to move toward a new career and a new pathway, and I found myself in quality and risk and patient safety, still thinking about how to take care of the patients I was so passionate about when I was in the ED. I loved that work, but finding a different way to impact healthcare. Now I study medical malpractice and learn how we make mistakes, how we avoid mistakes, and how we can deliver safer care.
As you look back then on healthcare from where you are now and then when you started and entered the field 30 years ago, what have been the biggest changes? I mean, beyond changes in the way diseases are, we can deal with them. What have you seen, particularly for women in healthcare?
Well, I think, first of all, women in leadership roles in healthcare have grown significantly. I think originally you saw us as nurses and the bedside partners, and I dare use the word handmaidens to the physicians who were seen as the gods of medicine, and we were the doers of the tasks. I think that we've been elevated significantly, even at the bedside, to be seen as partners. My particular area of expertise is in diagnosis and diagnostic failure, and nurses are considered the bedside partner to the physician. And physicians are so many more women now than ever before. And senior leadership roles are being filled by women as well. So I think the role of women has really expanded in healthcare.
Why is patient safety so important to you?
Oh, it is critical. There was a large, significant document that came out in 1999 called To Err is Human. It was published by the Institute of Medicine. And it was the first time that it openly acknowledged that we as providers of healthcare are human and we make mistakes. We aren't God. None of us are. But if we don't understand how those mistakes are made and how we can set up systems and teamwork and improve communication to protect our patients and ourselves from the pain of being part of one of those errors, we'll never really advance the skill sets and the industry of healthcare. So patient safety is a way in which we've really started to embrace providing safer, whole, healthier care for everyone. And that's alongside all of the amazing advances in healthcare. But advances bring risk. So we have to constantly be understanding and estimating risks of new advancements. And patient safety embraces that as well.
You know, you're so well spoken and you travel all over the country. You speak, you present to groups large and small. And I'm going to guess that your theater background makes you a pretty engaging speaker.
I am fortunate and blessed. It's ironic that most people will tell you that public speaking is their greatest fear.
That's right.
And I can't connect with that at all. I just give me an audience and I am a happy soul. Ironically, I almost didn't take the job I have now, which I absolutely love, because my personal fear is flying. And I have to travel so much for the job that I do. So when I think about all the people who struggle with patient safety, with public speaking, I think to myself, that's how it feels when I'm in a plane. But I'm very, very happy to be blessed even to be in the position I am to share the message I do.
You were just talking about fear. And I remember learning that the way we get over fear is by being brave. And by doing things that we think we can't do or trying things that are brand new to us. So are you getting better about flying, or do you still have a little mini nervous breakdown every time?
Well, I don't recall grabbing the arm of the person beside me lately, although I met a few strangers that way in my earlier years. But indeed, it does. It gets easier and it gets better. You challenge yourself to do it. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's persistence in the face of fear. And I think that's really what I kept telling myself each time I got on a plane and flew.
Let's go back a little bit. You attended nursing school. Tell me about that decision and what led you to medicine in the first place.
Oh, well, actually, I wasn't heading to medicine. I was heading to Broadway originally. And my mother had some wiser thoughts about that when I was very passionate about theater as a youth. And I didn't even want to perform. I wanted to run a casting company, ironically. My mother made it very clear that if I pursued something practical like nursing, that she would support and help pay for my education. If I was heading to Broadway, I was on my own. So the decision was kind of made for me.
Yeah.
So I took the practical route. In the beginning, to be quite honest with you, I struggled. I didn't fall in love with nursing right away. But then in my second year, I found the emergency room. And it is so much like theater. It's immediate, it's active. It requires you to react and think and be present in the moment. And I became so passionate about being in the ED that I really found my niche.
Boy,
in
talk about an
medicine.
adrenaline rush, right?
Yeah, definitely.
You then went to Northeastern University. Tell me a little bit about that. What did you study there?
Nursing.
Oh, okay.
Although I did minor in theater arts as well. I went to in the 70s when we went to nursing school, you went to a diploma school, and that was considered the revered way in which you got your nursing education. And you got an RN and you took your state boards and you had a diploma. You didn't have a degree. But as the career began to advance and as professions began to advance, nursing felt that it wasn't fairly represented in the advancement if you didn't have the degree work. So we all went back to school to work on our degrees. But while I was there, I definitely slipped in a few acting and directing courses as well.
You know, when we first started talking, you mentioned that you needed to take a career break or take a little left-hand turn when you were diagnosed with MS. Can you talk about that?
Sure. It's funny because when I think of the time in which I was confronted with that, it was so emotional and so devastating in the moment that first of all, it's a disease that doesn't have a clear pathway. And it's different for everybody. So you really don't know when you first start down that journey what your journey will be like. This many, many years later, I am blessed with a journey that was kinder to me than it has been to many. But my earlier years, I had symptoms that were stroke-like. In fact, they initially thought I had a stroke in my early 20s. The long and short of it is the dysfunction from MS affects the way you think, the way you walk, the way you're able to handle shakes and tremors. And it really was inconsistent with my capacity to be active and on and alert and responsive in the emergency room. In fact, I had a serious fall at one point. I fractured my hip. Whether it was disease-related or not was never really resolved. But the bottom line is I became unstable physically in that environment. So I had to find a new way, which was really disappointing because I had fallen in love with the ED.
Yeah.
But, there's something that tells us that sometimes you have to let go of the life you're living to find the life you were meant to live. And now, in hindsight, and with the maturity of many years later, gosh, I'm grateful because where I ended up going is so much richer and healthier for me to manage my disease. I have had many, many more healthier years now that I do less physical work professionally, although one would wonder what running around the theater is like 3 and 4 nights a week. But I manage.
I had a woman here sitting right where you are who is also an MS survivor. And she said that when she got the news that she had MS, she sat on the couch and she ate bonbons and she watched Oprah and she felt sorry for herself for a few days. And her husband or her father looked at her and said, "It's not what happens to you in life. It's how you handle it."
And completely agree. completely agree. For me, as the scientist in me kicked in, and I started research. I needed to know every single thing I could. Ironically, I had a girlfriend who was diagnosed almost within weeks of me, and we both worked in the same place. So there was an interesting assessment of this new building we were even working in and did that. So my earlier diagnosis was also a study for somebody else in how we got the disease and so forth. So I was kind of blessed in an odd sort of way that my own personal reaction initially was derailed by the scientist in me that wanted to understand what had happened. When I realized it was going to change my career path 6 months or a year later, that's when I really started having the, oh my gosh, what's happened to me and how am I ever going to adapt to this?
One of the things that I notice about your story so far, and I bet our listeners are feeling the same way, is you really can adapt. You're very versatile. First, you want to go into theater. Your mother says, hey, I'm not going to support you unless you go become a nurse. Okay, Mom, I'll become a nurse. Then you become a nurse. You fall in love with the ED. Oh, now we have MS. Now we have to find another course. You're very resilient, aren't you?
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
At the core of it, it comes from my faith. I'm an extremely faith-based, faith-driven person.
Tell me about that.
I personally have always believed that there is a higher power. For me, it is a God, a true and loving and forgiving and supportive God. And interestingly, a lot of people who have faith also believe that everything happens for a reason. As a scientist, I struggle with everything that happens for a reason, being driven by God per se. I recognize the free will of humans, and I worked in a place that saw some of the most egregious, heartbreaking things happen, car accidents by drunk drivers and children who were abused. This is not the work of God. But what I came to learn was we can find reason and purpose in everything that comes to us. And I think that's always been the way I've looked at my life is I don't think it happened.